connect.
Good morning, everyone. I hope everybody's having a great week, and this is Labor Day weekend. So everybody be safe out there and have a great time. Today I want to cover, under the compliance category, a few items that are just kind of, I think, helpful hints to everybody to make sure everything kind of runs smoothly. And the first item I want to talk about is the escrow demand regarding your commissions. That has to be uploaded into SkySlope before a file review can be approved. So keep in mind from the beginning, just get that escrow demand for commissions and get it uploaded into SkySlope, because without it, even with all the other documentation being in, we cannot give file approval. So again, please get that escrow demand in so we can get that file approved for you. So I appreciate that. Verification of property. You know, one of the items that I keep reminding when talking about this with individual agents is, you know, we're not contractors. We do not have a contractor's license, nor are we licensed to do contracting. So when it comes to verification of property, the same guideline, same rule applies. All we're looking for on that verification of property is the home in the same condition it was when our buyer purchased the property? You know, are there new gaping holes in the drywall if the seller had moved out? So you want to make sure that when you're going room to room doing your verification of property, that you're not, you know, what you're looking for is anything new that may have popped up that may affect the property, and then you just make a note of it and if it's a big enough item, then you get a contractor in there to try to figure out what needs to be done. But again, verification of property, all you're doing is to see if the home is in the same condition it was at the time the buyer purchased the property. Also keep in mind regarding the verification of property, you need to do that at least 5 days in advance of the close of escrow. And the reason for that is that if there is something that is found, then that gives you ample time to address the issue and hopefully get it resolved prior to the close of escrow. You know, the question then will come up, well, what happens if the seller hasn't moved out yet? Then you go ahead and do the main inspection 5 days before to see if there's anything major that may have popped up that you can see with the seller being in there. Get a move out date on the seller so that when you go back in, you can get a clear verification of property and after the seller has moved out as well. The biggest items I think I have found over the years is that drywall damage. You know, when you're moving furniture out, seems to be the big item there. But you know, again, what you're looking for is that if you have built-in garage cabinets or built-in cabinets anywhere in the home that were there at the beginning, and the seller has moved out, and all of a sudden those cabinets are gone. You know, again, if those cabinets are considered a fixture, if they're attached to the wall, you want to make sure you make note of that and get that issue resolved prior to the close of escrow. So those are the biggest items you're looking for through the verification of property. Rejected offers. Always for your peace of mind and for you if you're challenged, is to have the seller first initial off on the fact that they reviewed their written offer. So if another agent, a buyer's agent, contacts you and say, hey, what happened to my offer? And your response is, well, the seller rejected it. If I were that selling agent, I would say, I want verification of that, please. And verification is on page 10, the seller initials off on that they reviewed that agent's offer, that buyer's offer, and rejected it. Also, we have the required rejected offers document. Please pull that up, initial it, sign it, and we can all move on. That way, if you are challenged, it's just a real simple task. You pull up page 10, you make a copy of it, you send an email to that agent, say, per your request, here's proof of submission and rejection by the seller. So keep that in mind as you're moving forward. The EMD, this is a big item. And the reason it is that in today's world, we do not want you, the agent, nor us as the brokerage, to be handling checks, to be handling our clients' money. In order to do that, you need a detailed trust log, and there's a bunch of liability that goes on with that. You have to log the check coming in. You have to identify that check. You then have to take that check and log it out. When you take it, remove it from your possession to escrow, back to the buyer. Wherever that check ends up, you have to log it in, that you received it, maintain that check in your files, and then log it out and say where it went. There's a lot of legal liability that goes along with that. So again, have your client wire the money in. Once escrow is identified through the negotiation process, call that escrow, find out what their wire-in instructions are, and get it to your client so they can wire the money in. Trust me, it's a big headache. You don't want to deal with that, and not having to deal with the checks and logging them in, logging them out, and the legal liability that goes along with that. It's just easier to have your client wire the money in. That way you're not handling it, and it makes just for a smoother beginning to the transaction. I've talked about this before, and agency. I'm still working with that procuring cause issue that I have mentioned in the past. And obviously, the most important, when it comes to procuring cause, if you can get an exclusive buyer-broker agreement going, that's perfect. But lacking that, the agency document not only outlines to the client the agent's fiduciary responsibility to them as their representative, but it also establishes a relationship between the buyer and the agent. It's at this, for lack of a better term, it's at the superficial level, but it's better than nothing. And so if in the beginning, when you're doing hopefully all of you are doing your buyer interview, you'll have them sign the agency agreement. It's not a commitment on their part to only use you, but what it does do is establishes that you have a relationship with them, so that in the situation where you may show them a property and then they later decide they're going to go around you to go to the selling agent or the listing agent direct, then you can show not only that you, through procuring cause, that you opened their eyes to this particular property, but more importantly, you do have a relationship with that client per the agency agreement. So again, I can't overestimate how important that is. Documentation in your files is so vitally important. Even in a smooth transaction where you think today nothing's going wrong, everything is running smoothly, everybody's happy, let's get this closed and move on. You never know what's going to happen down the road. You never know what could pop up with the home, with a representation type issue. So please document your files. Get your agency signed to show that relationship between you and your client. If you can get the buyer-broker agreement signed, great. Develop a skill for that. But short of that, please get that agency agreement signed. Just taking a step back again regarding documentation on a file. Keep all of your notes. Keep all of your emails. Keep all of your texts. Upload them into the files, because you just never know exactly what's going to happen. And I have two examples to pass on in connection with this. One being, I had a situation, over a year ago now, where everybody agreed the garage cabinets were attached to the garage wall and were fixtures. But when it came time to closing the escrow and the buyer started moving in, guess what? Those cabinets were gone. So our agent had conversations with the owner regarding that particular item, and that it was a fixture, needed to remain with the property, but had no documentation for it. So, again, it just makes our battle so much easier if we can point to an email, if we can point to a text, if we can point to, even if you have a verbal conversation with that client in the garage talking about, Mr. Seller, these are attached, these are fixtures. The selling agent as well as the buyer are anticipating that this will be in place when they close escrow and move in. So, this is a fixture, you need to leave it with the property. That's verbal. Then what you do is when you get home, you shoot that seller an email. Per our discussion today, I just want to emphasize and reiterate that the garage door, that the garage cabinets are considered fixtures because they are attached to the home, to the garage wall. So that way, again, you covered it verbally with the client. And number two, you sent an email confirming that conversation and exactly what was covered in that conversation. If the seller's going to take those cabinets, they're going to take them anyway. But trust me, when it comes to small claims court and things of that nature, if the buyer decides to go that route, that way it'll help you cover yourself, so that if that seller turns around, which is what happened in this case, and said to the buyer and the buyer's agent, "Oh no, my agent never covered that with me." Again, it's covering your tracks. Do it nicely. You don't have to be rude about it, but always cover your tracks. Unfortunately, we're in a world that this is a needed action that we all need to take. We need to cover ourselves. Second item I wanted to cover with you is in regards to the procuring cause. As silly as some of these details may seem at the time, it can come back and really shore you up. So, for example, Zillow. If you market yourself through Zillow on listings that come up in certain areas of that you cover, there may be a listing that is projected, and it's not your listing, but next to that listing is your picture. I know it's one of 3 or 4 pictures that are of agents that are there, and so a client can look at that listing and say, "Hey, I'm interested." Look over at the pictures of the agents next to them, and click on an agent, contact that agent for a viewing of that particular property. What you need to be, you want to get a copy of that, and the reason for that is, a lot of times when you get into disagreement, and then in this particular case we're talking procuring cause, the listing agent's saying, "Hey, your picture was at the top, it was easy confusion, and what we need, and therefore you were misrepresenting the fact that you were listing the property, and when in fact you weren't." In this particular case, our agent did keep good records, she did document herself, and guess what? The selling agent is claiming that the picture was at the top. It wasn't. It was third down from the top. There were 5 pictures. She was number 3. So, again, it just goes to help shore up our case that, listen, you guys are making some wild accusations here, and here's the proof that, here's the documentation and the proof that what you're saying isn't exactly right. So, again, details, document yourself, emails, text messages, everything. Just really keep a clear, precise record. And hopefully 90%, 95, 98% of the time it won't be needed. You won't have to refer back to it. But if it's there and if you have to refer back to it, trust me, you're going to love it, and you're going to be thanking yourself for it. And I'll be thanking you as well. Contingency. We have contingency, it's a 2-part, contingency 1 and contingency 2 in SkySlope in our checklist. Contingency 1 is for the first part. In other words, if a buyer is releasing their loan, their inspection reports, they're satisfied, they're going to go ahead and release the contingency for that, then that's the first part. The second part would be like with loan approval, appraisal, removal contingencies. That way, when you do remove those contingency part 2, that's all being taken care of systematically, so that On the selling side, the seller can feel relief that, yeah, I got a buyer here that's performing, that's great. The seller's agent can feel the same way. Oh, good, I've got a selling agent here that knows what they're doing. They're releasing the contingencies on time. You know, but the bottom line is, if there's an issue, whether it's with the inspections or whether it's with the loan appraisal or appraisal contingency, don't release a contingency until you have documentation that that contingency is removable. And by that I mean, for example, loan approval. I had a case, this is going back quite a few years, where a buyer verbally had an approval from the lender, and so they went ahead based on the verbal and released the contingency. Had nothing in writing. They went ahead and removed that contingency, the loan approval contingency, only to find out a couple of days later when the loan rep called them back that they did not have loan approval and that they couldn't get loan approval for whatever the reason was. Like I said, it was quite a few years ago. It's not uncommon for that to happen, particularly if you have not had control over the lender and who the buyer selected, and you have no experience with that lender. You got to be very careful about releasing those contingencies. So if you have a conversation with that lender and that lender states you have loan approval verbally, simply request an email, a confirmation in writing being the key, that you do have it, so that you have a fallback if something were to go sideways with the loan. So, of course, with movement mortgage, that's not an issue. That won't be a problem. So what I suggest is keep movement mortgage, Richard Thatcher, on your list of lenders, preferred lenders, to recommend to your client. That way you're covered and your client's covered. And trust me, you don't want to be in a situation where you removed a contingency only to find out it was premature. And wrap up here today. Today we're doing a short session. I just want to remind you regarding SkySlope, when upload your documents in a timely fashion so that as your close date is becoming closer and closer and nearer, that you have your files up to date and approved, and all you're doing is waiting for the closing statement to come in so you can upload that so we can just close out the file and all of us move on. Document your files. Remember the agency, get that signed at the beginning of your relationship with the buyer and with the seller for that matter. And just keep your files clean, up to date, get the signatures where you need them. Remember page 10 of the RPA. Once you present an offer to your seller, have them initial that they reviewed the file, and more importantly, if they reject it, that they rejected it. No reason is needed, just that they reviewed the file and rejected the file. So with that, I'm closing today. I hope you guys have a great rest of the week, and more importantly, have a safe and happy Labor Day weekend. Thank you. Goodbye.